Taoiseach, the crisis around Greece is about power. It's about punishment. The Greek government is upholding the values of solidarity and cooperation claimed by the European movement. And they've been punished for this. They're standing up for Greece, they're standing up for Greek citizens who are being punished by hostile EU institutions, many of them unelected, by the IMF and by some EU governments, including the Irish government. And Taoiseach, the Irish government has contributed in a real way to the current crisis. Last Monday, according to the Financial Times, Minister Noonan, along with the German Finance Minister, pressed for emergency financial support for Greek banks to be stopped unless capital controls were imposed. And on Sunday, Mr Noonan got his way when the ECB froze its funding line to Greek banks. Last week, you railed against the idea of debt write-down. You railed against the idea of debt relief for the Greek people. Now, that's no big surprise. You never asked for a debt write-down for the Irish people either. But Taoiseach, you have written off hundreds of millions in debt for companies in this state, including write-downs from state-owned and nationalised banks. Greece owes this state $300 million. Dennis O'Brien secured that much in debt write-downs from the IBRC. A state-owned bank, and the government thinks that's okay. So in your book it's okay to have debt write-downs for some folks, but not for the people of Greece. Now, is it not true that Fine Gael and Labour oppose a write-down for Greece because it would expose the failure of this government to demand the same thing for the people of this state? And will the government set aside your party political concerns and support the Greek government request for more time? Very simple request. You got a letter from the Prime Minister. You said no.
Thank you.
But will I ask you to reconsider and to support the Greek government request for more time to negotiate a fair settlement?
Well, Ireland's a part of the Eurozone, obviously. We're not the central player in this. Clearly, we have a deep understanding, more so than most, I might add, and an empathy with the people of Greece in respect of what's happened now. I'd make the point to you, Deputy Adams, and you know this better than anybody else in here. How many times over the last endless years did negotiations break down where people walked away from the table? And at the end of the day, it requires people to sit down and work out a solution to this, as it applies in this case also. I have to say that when the Prime Minister spoke at the European Council meeting on Thursday and Friday of the entire European Council as distinct from the Eurozone, he again made the point that his country and his government did not want to default, Yes, but these are the words not of Gerry Adams, but of Prime Minister Tsipras to the European Council. And he made the point that his country does not want to default, would not default, and move on. And the agreement and understanding clearly at that meeting was that the Eurozone meeting of ministers on the Saturday would work diligently, as they had done all through the week, on several occasions, to put together an acceptable, fair and workable outcome to this difficulty. And late in the evening, the negotiators on behalf of the Greek government were withdrawn on direction from Athens. Now, I hope that following the response from both the institutions and from other political leaders, that the authorities and the Prime Minister and his people will come back to the table and sit down and work out an acceptable position here. I'm glad that a new paper has been put on the table by Greece over the last period. We, for our part, as a country contributing to the European Union, we did contribute 350 million to the first programme for Greece. We ourselves were in a programme on the second occasion, therefore we didn't contribute to that. At the back end of the year, there may well be a requirement, if it gets that far, for a further programme, in which case Ireland probably would be expected to contribute again. There is the question of what will happen in the referendum, as is the sovereign right of a country to hold a referendum. But I'd say to you, Deputy Adams, that you mentioned about democracy, and this is true. But I had calls myself, one from a European leader who said, I can tell you, in my parliament I would not get through a motion to extend the bailout programme. I would not get it through because of the number of parties in the parliament in question. And that's democracy also. This question of a referendum could certainly have been raised over the last number of months, but it came at the very end. And it remains to be seen between here and next Sunday what actually will happen. And I'm glad that the Greek authorities have now tabled a new paper. At least, Deputy Adams, it's the basis for discussion and negotiation. And I do hope, and Ireland, along with our European colleagues, will help in every way that we can in respect of dealing with this. As I said recently, this country was on the edge just a few years ago. And if you applied what's happened in Greece to our situation now, you can understand the difficulties and the hardship that will be imposed on people. There is a way out of this, and it starts at the table.
Thank you. Deputy Adams?
Well, Taoiseach, despite your protestations, you show no evidence of any empathy whatsoever with people in Greece. And I'm not surprised by your refusal to adopt a more reasonable and compassionate position towards the people of that country. The Greek government has presented reasonable proposals. They'll send this briefing to anyone who wants it. They put forward reasonable proposals to grow the economy while protecting pensioners and those on low and middle incomes. Now, you don't favour that. You're against that. They called for a debt conference and a debt write-down. You're against that also. Why? Instead, you choose to impose austerity on those in this state who could least pay for it. Last week you claimed that in tackling the economic crisis here, that you did not increase income tax, increase VAT or increase PRSI.
Thank you.
Now, that's patently not true. You did raise income and consumption taxes. You also introduced water charges, a property tax. You opted for forced emigration, and now 500,000 of our citizens are scattered across the globe. 1/3 of our children, as we sit here or stand here, are living in consistent poverty. The sick and the elderly end up on trolleys instead of hospital beds. 426 citizens today on trolleys, Taoiseach. They and the homeless pay the price for your austerity policy. So it's little wonder you have no empathy. The real concern, your real concern, is political. The Greek government has made it clear that it wants to remain within the Eurozone. So is it not time for the European Union to make clear its desire to keep Greece in the EU, in the Eurozone, by negotiating a solution that doesn't impose years of economic depression on the Greek people? And more importantly, Taoiseach, would you use this answer to make it clear that you, speaking in behalf of Irish citizens, want and will actively support and will endorse and will be a champion of such a solution?
Taoiseach.
Well, on behalf of the people, I've already written formally to the Prime Minister saying that I regretted the fact that the negotiators on behalf of the Greek government were taken away from the negotiating table, and I urge that this should be that they should return there to resume discussions. And I'm glad that following the response from the leaders to whom the Prime Minister wrote, that the Greek authorities have now tabled a new paper. Let me say to you, Deputy Adams, that at the Eurozone meeting of all of the leaders, there was no question or discussion about the issue of write-down, of debt write-down. There was a direct reference to the question of reprofiling Greece's debt, and that could happen provided that the authorities and the institutions put together a deal on the Saturday at their meeting, that would be endorsed by the Greek government, given support to it, that it could then be put through the parliaments as is required of the Netherlands, of Finland, of Germany, and that in the implementation of that programme, which would carry through to October-November, that the review of the implementation of that could then look at the question of reprofiling Greek debt. As you're aware, in Ireland's case, we had a reprofiling in various elements of the debt here, including interest loan reductions, the extension of the maturities in respect of loans, and the question of dealing for a longer term at lower interest in respect of the promissory notes, which you raised here on many occasions. I assume, though, Deputy, that when you said that the European Union should be told to go and stuff itself, that you didn't take into account the structural funds, the common agricultural policy, the social fund and the other billions that will flow to this country as a part of the European Union and the transformation of our country over the last 40 years. So Ireland empathises, Deputy Adams. Ireland empathises Ireland empathises very much with the people in Greece. You might pretend to be the Greek party in Ireland here, but your own economics have given the lie to that, because they don't stand up. Now, I hope that Prime Minister Tsipras and his people get back to the negotiating table. This is a matter that can be solved.
Thank you.
And it will only be solved, Deputy Adams, by negotiation at a political level. The Greek authorities, for their own reasons, withdrew their negotiating team. My request and our support for them is to come back to that negotiating table and work out a solution, and we will help in every regard to that we can.
Thank you.